Hey guys, this is the Casual Fan. The Italian Grand Prix is done and dusted, and we have Max Verstappen breaking the record for the most consecutive wins in F1. We also had a Ferrari on the podium and a very impressive drive from Carlos Sainz as well. We also had quite a few interesting storylines. Well, this video is not about the storylines because we'll get to it later in the week. For this video specifically, we are talking about the drivers and how these drivers fared at the Italian Grand Prix. So without further ado, let's get straight to the business end of the video. Let's talk about the driver ratings for the 2023 F1 Italian Grand Prix. First of all, let's start with Red Bull and let's take a look at Max Verstappen. Now, talking about Max, the weekend in its entirety, it was again a very impressive and measured role that he played throughout the race weekend. The qualifying was good, very impressive. He made sure that he got the front row. Even in the race, he was not overtly taking too many risks. He waited until Carlos Sainz made a mistake. It was at that point that he pounced and got into the lead. Once he got into the lead, there was no one that was going to catch him, and it was quite obvious. And from that point onwards, it was pretty much the 10th consecutive win sealed by him. Overall, another impressive weekend. Overall, a weekend where he could have made mistakes. He could have been hasty, but he wasn't. He got the job done, and that is 10 consecutive wins in F1, an unprecedented record that is going to take a long time to break. In terms of ratings, he gets a rating of 9 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix because I feel he was maybe driving a bit within himself in qualifying and he left a bit on the table as well. So yeah, a rating of 9 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Sergio Perez, and I think another qualifying session where he should be disappointed. If you're going to be almost half a second slower than your teammate, then it's a disappointing qualifying session, whichever way you put it. Then if we talk about the race, it was an impressive measured drive because slowly but steadily he made his way through the field. The overtake on Russell was impressive. The overtake on Charles, another good one. And even on Sainz, which was, it was a bit, because of the robust defense from the Ferrari driver, things did get a bit edgy. But yes, overall, he got the job done. Now, again, there are some that might argue that he should get a higher rating. But overall, if you look at it, I don't think I can give him a rating of more than 6.5, considering the fact that his car was arguably quite easily the fastest car on the grid. And even then, he had to struggle this much to finish second in the race. So yeah, in my view, he gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Charles Leclerc, and well, overall, a very impressive qualifying. He was less than a tenth away from pole position in front of the Tifosi. Again, a very strong race as well, as he was less than a second behind Carlos when they both crossed the finish line. Having said that, even though it was a strong race weekend, I think it's safe to say that Carlos outperformed him, and that is somewhere where Charles, well, he would be feeling a bit disappointed because he was not the driver that got the pole position in front of the Tifosi. It was Carlos, and he was not the driver who got the podium. It was Carlos once again. So yes, overall, a decent weekend. He gets a rating of 8 out of 10. But maybe he would still be disappointed, especially if he sees the kind of results and accolades Carlos Sainz got in the other Ferrari cockpit. Now, next up, talking about Carlos Sainz, well, excellent qualifying, beating both Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen for pole is no mean feat. This has to be appreciated. Then even in the race, stunning defense, in my view, against Max or Sergio or Charles. It was maybe over the limit quite a few times, but well, he got away with it. And he was very gritty. I feel he out-gritted Charles and got the podium this time around, and that is something that should not be taken lightly. Overall, I think this was an elite weekend from Carlos, something that he has not done often in his career, and he gets a rating of 10 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, let's talk about Mercedes, and first of all, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton. Now, talking about Lewis, well, the qualifying was poor from his part. Being so far off his teammate it's just not justified in any which way. He made strong progress in the race, using hard tires in the first stint. It did appear that it helped him a lot and helped him gain positions later in the race. Then again, to cap it all off, the clumsy contact with Oscar Piastri was not desirable and something he will be disappointed with. And yes, in the end, if you take everything together, it was not one of the more perfect weekends from Lewis. He got a P6 result, which was impressive, but overall a disappointing one, and he gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have George Russell, and for George, this was a very impressive weekend, and this was a weekend that he needed the most. He has been struggling in qualifying for a while against Lewis, and post summer break, he has been able to out-qualify Lewis on both occasions. He has found something in the car that he was struggling with earlier in the season, and that is and that shows how much work he puts into his craft. In terms of his overall weekend, a stunning qualifying session to out qualify a Red Bull at Monza it deserves applause. Then if we talk about the race, it was a sturdy defense as much as he could have against Sergio pretty much throughout the race. Then in the end, I think he got the maximum possible result that was there with the Mercedes, and a P5 is the best that he could have achieved. So yes, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 9 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Alpine, and first of all, let's talk about Esteban Ocon. Now, not much to say. The car had no pace whatsoever, probably a result of how poor the Renault power unit is. So really, not much Esteban Ocon could do. Well, whatever he put together in qualifying was a bit meaningless. There's no point to it. Even in the race, he retired, I think, midway through the race. And again, there was no progress that he could make. He was stuck behind cars, had no straight line speed, nothing. So yes, overall a weekend to forget for Alpine, and he gets a rating of 6 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Pierre Gasly, and I think it's almost similar to what we could say about Esteban Ocon, because again, a meaningless qualifying and a meaningless race as well. When you're stuck in traffic, you cannot make progress. There's really nothing much you could do. There was no pace to exploit. It wasn't only the fact that he did not have the top speed, he did not have the overall pace as well. So yes, a weekend to forget, not much to speak about, and a rating of 6 out of 10 for Gasly as well. Next up, talking about Lando Norris, then a decent qualifying. He was out qualified this time around by Oscar. Then a decent race, he got the jump on him. Again, the car was a bit limited, the lack of top speed hurt, and even though he was able to get the better of Lewis in qualifying, Mercedes had a better race pace and Lewis was able to get the jump on him. Overall, a decent race, and he gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Now, talking about Oscar Piastri, well, something similar to Lando, to be honest. A very good qualifying session. He got the jump on Lando in qualifying. He out-qualified him, a rare thing for this season. And even in the race, both were somewhat similarly paced. Lando got the jump in the pit stops, but not the difference was not more than a position between the two. Again, he could have scored points, but well, Lewis Hamilton happened. He damaged his front wing, and even though Lewis got a penalty, Oscar's race was pretty much destroyed. And yeah, that was how it ended. In terms of rating, he gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10. And slowly but steadily starting to close on Lando even more. And things could get interesting at McLaren. Now next up, we have Alfa Romeo. First of all, let's talk about Valtteri Bottas. Now in terms of qualifying, it was well, whatever the Alfa Romeo could produce, Bottas got that result in terms of qualifying. The race was where Bottas shined. The strategy that he was on, he was able to make the most of it and ultimately scored a point for Alfa Romeo, something that has been a rare occurrence this season. So yes, overall, I feel it is one of the weekends where Bottas showed his experience and got the points, and he showed what value he brings to the team. So a good weekend, and he gets a rating of 8 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Zhou Guanyu, and well, overall a weekend where he was overshadowed by Valtteri Bottas. More importantly, another poor qualifying session, another poor race. The worst part for him is not what happened in the F1 race. It was the fact that Theo Porcher got even closer to the F2 World Championship. I fear Zhou's seat might be in danger for next season. Either ways, because his performances have not been improving. And if Theo wins the Formula 2 Championship, there's a very high likelihood that he will end in Formula 1, which could be to the detriment of Zhou. Next up, we have Aston Martin. And at Aston Martin, first of all, let's talk about Fernando Alonso. Now, talking about Alonso, his qualifying was a bit... He was in the shadows a bit. He was a bit anonymous in the qualifying session. And he did his qualifying lap pretty much earlier than everyone else. And he did it without any tow. So it was a bit of a surprise. Even in the race, he was a bit anonymous to an extent, because I think he didn't really try to make up too many places. And even when he was defending against Lewis, he left the inside door open for Lewis to just go through. A weekend where I feel Alonso saw that the car was not up to the mark, and he just tried to get through the weekend without putting too much effort into it. And maybe if he had been more motivated, I feel he could have defended a bit better against Lewis, maybe. But yes, maybe a bit of a lackluster weekend from Alonso, and he gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Lance Stroll, and I mean, whatever excuses we can put forward, that the fact that he lost out the entire Friday, I mean, we can put out any excuses that we want, but at the end of the day, it was a poor qualifying session. He was last in an Aston Martin, And this is not 2022 where the car is nowhere. So it is not justified, and it is just not up to the mark. And then if you talk about the race, he ultimately finished, I think, P14, P15, something like that. Nowhere close to sniffing even a point. When that happens, I mean, I think it has been said a lot of times by plenty of different pundits, but Lance Stroll seems to be the dead weight that is holding Aston Martin back. And it will be interesting to see if the team finally realizes and maybe takes some contingency measures in case if it wants to improve its future, and maybe find the right direction, and I don't know, find a better solution, because this is just not working. Lance Stroll as the second driver at Aston Martin is just a waste of a seat. I don't know what to say more than that. It's been a bit frustrating to see a top seat at a top team get wasted in such a manner. Having said that, for the Italian Grand Prix, he gets a rating of 2 out of 10 for a pretty symbolic weekend overall. Next up, we have Haas, and first of all, let's talk about Nico Hülkenberg. Now, something that I have said quite a few times in the past driver ratings as well, when it comes to the Haas drivers, the template is almost fixed. For Nico Hülkenberg, it is, he will have a pretty impressive qualifying session. He will have a pretty decent first 10 to 12 laps of the race, and then it will all come clattering down because the car does not have the race pace to withstand any competition. Well, this is exactly what happened this time around as well. A pretty impressive or pretty decent qualifying session from Hülkenberg. He was P13, I think, while his teammate could not even make it through to Q2. So that is also there. Overall, another weekend where it clearly showed that the car is limiting the driver more than the driver limiting the car. That is the case with Lance Stroll, to be honest. And yes, Hülkenberg gets the rating of 7 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Kevin Magnussen, and just like his Haas counterpart, the template has been somewhat laid down. For Magnussen, it has become a bit of a habit that he will have a poor qualifying session. The session in Monza was no different. Right now, he is 11-3 against Hülkenberg. 3-11, rather I should say, against Hülkenberg in qualifying. And the average gap in qualifying is almost half a second. Then in races, once you're starting from a poor position in a car that has no race pace, you are never going to make progress. And as a result, Kevin Magnussen basically was anonymous in the race, could not do much, to be honest. And yes, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 4 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Yuki Tsunoda, who was arguably the most unfortunate driver in Monza. Well, he had a decent qualifying session. He was P11. That was going to be his starting position. But then he could not even start the race because of some reliability issue. Unfortunate, but really not much to say. And rating, it's a bit of a... I mean, it's hard to give him any rating for this weekend. But only based on qualifying, I'm just giving him a rating of 6 out of 10, an average rating. Because he could have scored points if we look at how the Alfa Romeo of Bottas ended up doing that. So yes, a somewhat disappointing weekend because there were points on the table and he could not snatch them. Now talking about Liam Lawson, and yeah, the kid has got pace. I think that has been very impressive to see. He's not too far behind Yuki, and he should be competitive against Yuki even in the future as well. And he should be competitive against Yuki in the future as well. That is something for sure. However, overall, I think he's doing a decent job. Who knows how Yuki would have performed in the race, but still Liam is keeping his nose clean, not crashing, not being too far off his teammate as well. So yeah, a decent overall start to his career, and he gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10 for the Italian Grand Prix. Now after AlphaTauri, let's talk about Williams, and first of all, let's talk about Alex Albon. Now Alex Albon and his stock has been growing with every race ever since the summer break. During the summer break, as soon as we were coming out of that latent phase, there were rumors and reports by Lawrence Barreto that Albon was being quoted by 5 teams. There were 5 teams that have shown interest in Alex Albon. Now with the kind of races that he's put together since then, both in Zandvoort as well as in Monza, that stock is only going to rise. Another impressive weekend from him, completely demolished his teammate, showed very, very impressive defensive driving against both the McLarens as well as Lewis for a while. Overall, a strong weekend and strong points for his team, and he's basically flying the flag on his own at Williams, and that should be applauded. So yes, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 9 out of 10 for a very impressive weekend from Alex Albon. Finally, let's talk about Logan Sargent, and I think this was a weekend where he once again missed out. He should have done better in qualifying. He did not. It was a poor qualifying session. He should have done better in the race. He did not. It was once again a case of Logan underachieving when his teammate is scoring points. At the end of the day, after 14 races, he's not even qualified his teammate once. And also, there are 21 points that Alex Albon has accumulated until now. Logan has done none of that, and that is something that is going to hurt him in the long run. And in terms of his future, I don't know where it puts him. In terms of his rating in the Italian Grand Prix, he gets a rating of 5 out of 10 for a very disappointing weekend, a weekend where he should have shined. So yeah, not the best weekend for the American overall. Now this concludes the overall driver ratings for the Italian Grand Prix. Now you can take a look at the ratings and you can see that Carlos Sainz has been the driver of the weekend this time around, getting a rating of 10 out of 10 at the Italian Grand Prix. He was the only driver who was able to accomplish it. Then there were some impressive drives from Alex Albon, George Russell, Max Verstappen. All of them got a 9. Arguably the worst weekend goes to Lance Stroll, who got a rating of 2 out of 10 for a poor show in qualifying as well as in the race. Now let's take a look at the cumulative ratings after 14 races into the season. Now looking at these ratings, there are a few surprises. I guess the biggest of them all is the surprise movement of Alex Albon. Now he is the 4th best driver on the current grid in terms of the driver ratings. Then we also see Carlos Sainz making a leap. Now he is one of the top 10 drivers of the season. He's being closely pursued by Oscar Piastri and Pierre Gasly. Also looking at Sergio Perez, he's in 16th, and that is somewhat disappointing because the driver, he has the best car on the grid and he should be performing better. Then in 20th we have Lance Stroll, another major disappointment, and again something that is a bit of a head scratcher for Aston Martin. Overall, these are the ratings for the 2023 F1 Italian Grand Prix, and this is the cumulative ratings. Do you have any questions? Do you have any different views? Drop your views in the comment section, and thanks for watching. See you next time. I hope you liked the video.